Hello, this is Focus on Africa. I'm Lukwesa Burek. Our top stories. Back home, some of the Ethiopian migrants held in overcrowded detention centres in Saudi Arabia arrive in the country.
There were more than 200 of us in one room. If someone is sick, they wouldn't come visit us if we knocked doors. We slept on the floors, some close to the toilet.
South Africa remembers George Besos, the lawyer who helped defend Nelson Mandela during apartheid, who's died aged 92. After weeks of heavy rains across Sudan, one of the country's most important archaeological sites is under threat as floodwaters creep ever closer. Also in the programme, taking a lead on mental illness. The Kenyan musicians tackling fame, insecurity and depression by talking. Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa, coming to you from BBC World News. Now, over 140 Ethiopian migrants have been repatriated home from Saudi Arabia. They're amongst many who are being filmed, held in overcrowded detention centres by the Saudi authorities. Now, the images of those cramped and unhygienic conditions sparked international condemnation and criticism. Those who arrived in Addis today were all women, but reports say thousands more might still be held in Saudi Arabia. Well, the BBC's Kalkadan Yebetel was at the airport, the international airport in Addis, as they arrived.
Finally on home soil, after living in squalid conditions for months in detention camps in Saudi Arabia, today the first 147 are repatriated. Their flight costs were covered by the Saudi government, and now the Ethiopian government will have to reintegrate them to their communities here. But all this not before accusations that it had abandoned its own citizens abroad. And some of them told me that they couldn't be happier to be back home.
I
am truly happy that I come back home. It's from my heart that I feel happy. I didn't think that I would come back because of all the hardships we saw there. I spent 7 months detained there. Now I give praise to Allah that I am back.
This video, filmed secretly in the past few weeks by the Human Rights Watch, showed the filthy conditions under which many migrants were living. The men were kept separated from the women, and this is the women's very crowded area. Many of them said they were rounded up from their homes and ended up in these detention camps. The men were also living in unhygienic conditions, saying they had little to eat and hardly any access to medical care. Saudi authorities say they would investigate these reports. Today's returnees described the conditions under which they were kept.
I spent 6 months in detention camp and it was very difficult. First, there were more than 200 of us in one room. If someone is sick, they wouldn't come visit us if we knocked doors. We slept on the floors, some close to the toilet.
Most of these migrants traveled to the Saudi kingdom through war-torn Yemen, crossing over extremely rugged terrain in the hope of a better future. But for these migrants and thousands of others still believed to be detained in the kingdom, it seems that their journey is set to end where it all began. Kalkadan Yebetel, BBC News, Addis Ababa.
And the BBC has contacted the Saudi Arabian authorities, and they say that investigations are still ongoing. Well, for those who arrive back in Ethiopia today, there are plenty more, thousands in fact, more Ethiopian and Somali migrants stranded in Yemen, mainly because of coronavirus travel restrictions. Now, they were hoping to travel on to neighbouring Saudi Arabia to find work. Instead, they're now homeless, living in squalid conditions and unable to go home even if they wanted to. The BBC's Victoria Awanda has this report.
These are migrants from Ethiopia and Somalia. They are stranded in Yemen. Most of them were on their way to Saudi Arabia looking for work.
In restaurants, they beat us. At first, it was fine, but now we are getting hit. They said that we are the cause of coronavirus and asked us to leave. I don't want to stay in Aden anymore.
An estimated 14,500 migrants are stranded in Yemen at the moment. They live in deserted and unsafe buildings.
These migrants are facing discrimination and exclusion from society. Many believe they bring diseases and transmit infection into society.
Travel restrictions have reduced the number of people entering Yemen, but they also delay the return of those who wish to go back to their countries.
Migrants struggle at entry gates, the risk of kidnapping and torture by smugglers and traffickers. They demand a ransom for their families in Ethiopia in exchange for their release.
Some migrants live with no access to clean water or health services, and like Yemenis, their lives get harder over time. Victoria Wonghunda, BBC News.
Tributes are being paid to George Besos, the renowned South African human rights lawyer who helped defend Nelson Mandela. Mr. Besos, who fled the Nazi occupation from his native Greece as a child, died on Wednesday at the age of 92. One of his final legal appearances was to represent the families of the Americana massacre. President Cyril Ramaphosa described him as someone who had contributed immensely to the nation's democracy. Our South Africa correspondent, Nomsa Masego, looks back at his life.
A lifelong friend of Nelson Mandela, George Besos witnessed and indeed played an immense role in many of the key moments which formed South Africa's democracy. Mr. Besos was part of the team of lawyers at the Rivonia trial, which saw Nelson Mandela and other high-ranking political activists sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964. Even after South Africa became a democratic country, Mr. Besos was not afraid to speak out against injustices and government corruption, no matter how unpopular it made him.
Nelson Mandela would be disappointed with some of the things that are happening in South Africa. He would be disappointed by the corruption.
In one of his last major cases, he led the inquiry into the Marikana massacre, which saw the killing of 34 mine workers by South African police in 2012. The human rights advocate believed that the killing of workers who were protesting over a wage dispute was a watershed moment in post-apartheid South Africa. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said it was a very sad moment for the country and that Mr. Besos would be sorely missed.
We dip our heads in honor of the contribution that George Besos has made to our democracy. We will forever remember his contribution.
Mr. Besos is survived by 3 sons and 7 grandchildren.
George Besos, who's died at the age of 92. OK, let's just take a look at some of the other stories making headlines across Africa. And vote counting is underway in the region of Tigray in northern Ethiopia after Thursday's state election held in defiance of a nationwide ban. National and regional polls were due to be held in August, but the government in Addis postponed the vote because of the pandemic. The authorities in Tigray warned of unrest if the ruling coalition tried to obstruct the regional poll. At least 65 people are now known to have died in Niger after months of heavy rain. Over 300,000 people have been affected by flooding, and several areas of the capital Niamey remain underwater after the Niger River broke its banks. And there's been heavy rain across the Sahel regions of West and Central Africa, including Nigeria, Chad and Cameroon. It's believed dozens of people have died. The consumer goods giant Unilever says it's pulling all its Tresemme hair products from South African retail stores for 10 days, following a controversial advert that depicted black people's hair as dry and damaged and the hair of a white blonde woman as fine, flat and normal. The advert was first published on the website of the health and beauty chain Clicks and has been described as racist and offensive by many South Africans. Several retailers have already announced that they're removing all Tresemme products from their shelves. The Nobel Peace Laureate Denis Mukwege has been placed back under the protection of United Nations security forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo after death threats were made against him. A COVID-19 outbreak amongst UN troops meant he was left without a security detail since May. The gynecologist and his colleagues have treated tens of thousands of rape victims, and he also went on to share his Nobel Prize in 2018. Mr. Mukwege received the death threats after he tweeted about a recent massacre in July, and as he continues to call for justice for war crime victims in eastern DRC between 1993 and 2003. The UN explained why it's supporting him.
The UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC remains committed to the security of Dr. Mukwege and the Panzi Clinic in the eastern DRC. Although a number of COVID cases among our peacekeepers have had an operational impact, we have continued to work closely with Dr. Mukwege and the Congolese authorities, as well as international partners, to ensure his security needs and those of the clinic are addressed in an effective and sustainable manner. This approach requires us to continue developing greater local capacity among national police with support from the mission and other international partners. The personal security of Congolese personalities is a responsibility of the national authorities, but the UN peacekeeping mission is providing all possible support within its limited means.
That's a UN spokesman there. Now, the race is on to try and save some of Sudan's most important archaeological sites from flooding. Heavy rains have caused unprecedented flash floods, where the Blue and White Niles join to become the Nile. The resulting destruction across the country has led to the government declaring a 3-month state of emergency. Around 100 people have died. Now, concern is growing over the fate of the ruins at Al-Bajrawiya, which features pyramids built by the ancient Meroe civilization and are more than 2,300 years old. Archaeologists say that they haven't previously been affected by flooding. Well, the BBC's Sally Nabil has more.
There is huge concern about the safety of the archaeological site that includes the pyramids in Sudan. The area called Al-Bajrawiya is enlisted as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In addition to the pyramids, it has other relics that are more than 2,000 years old. Experts say for the time being the situation is still under control, but they do not know what's going to happen if water levels keep rising, especially given the unprecedented scale of damage caused by the floods. We know the area is less than 1 kilometer away from the Nile and nearly a 2-hour drive from the capital Khartoum, but given the bad road conditions because of the water, it will definitely take you much longer to get there. We understand that sandbag walls are in place and people are trying to pump water out of the area, but we do not know yet for how long these efforts can last. Floods in Sudan have been quite regular, but it's the first time that archaeological sites come under threat.
That was Sally Nabil there. You're watching Focus on Africa. Do stay with us because still to come, business as usual. Well, we'll be finding out why some foreign shop owners in Ghana are finding themselves locked out. Welcome back. Now, in Ghana, the government is facing accusations by a number of business owners that they're being targeted by the authorities because they're foreign nationals. More than 400 shops, most of them belonging to Nigerians, have been forced to close following a drive to enforce strict local business regulations. Now, Ghanaian laws bar foreigners from operating many small-scale businesses, especially those within local markets, but Nigeria's government claims that Ghana is unfairly harassing its citizens. From Accra, the BBC's Thomas Nardi has more on the background to the dispute.
Foreigners who want to engage in business in the country are required to invest a minimum capital of $1 million in cash or goods or services, an amount many small-scale foreign traders cannot afford. But Ghanaian authorities have said that over 90% of the shops closed in this exercise failed to comply with the business operating requirements like permits, environmental protection, and payment of tax. Some of the affected traders are now idle with no other means of survival.
Unlike previously where they were forcibly closed by local traders, this time law enforcement agencies are undertaking the exercise. The majority of the affected traders are Nigerians who feel that they are being deliberately targeted by Ghanaian authorities.
The shops that are being closed belong to Nigerian nationals. And we have other nationals that run these markets. And those nationals are doing their business without any interruption or interference from the government agencies.
The Ghanaian authorities have denied the allegations, insisting that they are not targeting any particular nationality. The two countries have been engaging each other to resolve the impasse.
One, to set up the Ghana-Nigeria Business Council to specifically look at issues of trade and educating our citizens so that we can comply better in both countries. Two, to quickly convene the next Ghana-Nigeria Joint Commission to deal with matters of immigration and other issues that may come in. Three, to explore the possibility of joint legislation between the two countries to deepen general relations and economic activity. And then finally, to work on improving perceptions among our citizens in either country.
The ongoing exercise and the closure of Nigeria border with Benin since last year to stop smuggling of goods could affect the objective of the regional body ECOWAS to promote a single market in West Africa. Thomas Nadi, BBC News, Accra.
Today is World Suicide Prevention Day with the aim of raising awareness and prevention. Now, it's based on data from 2016. The World Health Organization has shown that there were an estimated 793,000 suicide deaths in the world, which equates to approximately 10.6% of the population. Now, Lithuania recorded the highest rate at 31.9%. In Africa, that rate in the same period was 7.4% for both men and women, compared to Europe, which had the highest regional rate at 15.4%. Now, on the continent itself, the numbers offer stark reading. 4.8% of those whose deaths were ruled suicide were women, whilst men were double that, 9.9%. Lesotho had the highest rate of suicide across Africa at 21.2%. Now, the WHO says that suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds globally, and that it can be prevented. So why are all the numbers still in the double digits? Well, let's find out. Let's speak to an expert. Hiram Chombe is a suicide prevention expert. Thank you very much for joining us here. Not the easiest subject to talk about, so where do you start, particularly for those who are going through and dealing with these suicide thoughts?
Well, we have to appreciate the fact that, over 70% of all suicides, 79% of all suicides happen in low and medium income countries, which, Kenya is one of those countries. So you have to appreciate, of course, the number could be pointing to really very key issues that are affecting Africa and Kenya at large, and the Kenyan population at large. One of the things is poverty, a lot of ignorance and a lack of education, and also a lot of copycat suicides happening in our society. So it not just points to mental health issues, it equally points to systemic issues, the collapse of social structures that offer essential support mechanisms for people who might be vulnerable.
Okay, so obviously these things differ by age group and by gender as well. So how do you start to help and to support? Do African countries have that capacity?
I think over the years we've seen an increase in the level of awareness. So I would say in the last about 5 years, we've seen an increased level of awareness, even in government, increased level of funding. But we still have a long way to go because, as we speak, a lot of African countries still consider suicide a crime. So that, of course, hampers a lot of efforts in regards to helping persons who might be suicidal or who might have attempted. So we still have a long way in regards to data collection. We do not have a formal surveillance systems in most African countries to track data on people who attempt suicide or who have completed suicides. So that becomes a challenge in regards to being able to provide specific and contextual suicide prevention activities. So there's something happening, but we still have a long way to go in terms of evidence-based interventions.
Okay, so you mentioned there decriminalisation. You'd think in this day and age when people are talking more, we could have moved a lot further along with this. Does that suggest that suicide just isn't up in the priorities of governments, particularly at the moment with the pandemic?
Absolutely. I would say that because we still, in a lot of African countries, the level of funding of mental health services is still astronomically low. So if you consider mental health workers, a lot of them are still not yet receiving essential support for the frontline workers, mental health caregivers. So I would say we are slowly getting there in regards to legislative mechanisms, but I still don't think it's really a key agenda, but slowly we are getting there. I wouldn't be quick to judge, but because of even in Kenya, we've seen over the years, and in Ghana, for instance, in Uganda, a few African countries in South Africa also trying to move into the criminal suicide. So I wouldn't say we're really in a bad state, but we still need, decriminalization of suicide needs to be a priority first before we even move to funding of mental health.
Okay, Hiram Chumba, thank you very much for your time and expertise there. Thank you. Lots of celebrities have now started discussing mental issues, and many people are saying it does help. Well, there's a term called dustbin, which is very popular amongst male celebrities, and basically it's when you're feeling low. So let's have a listen as to how it helps some Kenyan musicians.
Men are under a lot of pressure, to perform. I'm successful at my job. My kids are going to good schools, because that's actually the beginning. That's the birth of toxic masculinity.
You go through similar challenges like everyone else is going through, but yours is being televised. What would happen is, when someone is just feeling a bit down, you're not going to come and say, hey guys, nasikia depressed, nasikia vibaya. You'll come in like, hey manze, nasikia niko dustbin manze.
In that dustbin are matters that are affecting a lot of artists. And this is anxiety, it's anxiety of being in public sometimes. Sometimes I'm in a restaurant and people are staring at me and my wife. And it's just uncomfortable sometimes, or sometimes I can lock them out.
I always remember a particular time I was going through some stress, emotional stress. And I knew that if I cry, it will release. But because of conditioning of men don't cry, I actually couldn't cry. No, I tried. That's what I'm saying. It is so funny that I realized conditioning had made me feel you can't. For me to share with maybe someone who works in an office, under pressure, in tech, may not fully understand some things. Maybe there are some things that Ben will say or even go through, or I just know because of what I go through with the pressure. I've been there, done that, or I'm going through that in a different way. So even when there's an empathy level that comes naturally because you're both, you're all in the same kind of career,
The expectations of me as a son, the expectations of me as a husband, my expectations as BN of Sauti Sol, of what I'm supposed to do for the music industry. Like, my manhood will be measured by my achievements and not by how much I loved, or not by how much I was passionate about music.
You've been watching Focus on Africa. Bye-bye.